In a palace ruled by fear and silence, one human dared to speak to the creature no one else could approach. A beast of fire and shadow, known only for destruction. But what if the monster wasn't the villain? What if he was just waiting for someone to understand him? This is the story of how kindness tamed chaos and how a single voice changed everything. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show your support with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's move toward this wonderful story. The royal throne room of Tarson 9 was a place few entered willingly. The walls, made of glimmering crystal and humming with energy, reflected the violet light of the twin moons outside. At the center of it all, wrapped like a living shadow around, the queen's throne lay Zurok, a creature whispered about across star systems. With scales black as night and eyes like burning coals, Zurok had become a symbol of both fear and power. His claws were large enough to tear through a spacecraft's hull. His breath could melt steel, and he did not obey anyone, not even Queen Selithra, without resistance. The guards who stood along the walls kept their distance, their hands shaking slightly despite the hours of training. Courtiers spoke only in whispers, if at all. Every sound in the room felt like it could trigger disaster. 17 lives had been lost in the last month. Some soldiers, others ambassadors who spoke too boldly or moved too quickly. One engineer had dropped a tool and never even had time to scream. Zurok had been bred for war, some said. Others claimed he was something ancient, a force too wild to understand. No one could agree on where he came from, but all agreed on one thing. He was uncontrollable. When Kalen Rios entered the room, nobody expected him to leave it alive. He wasn't a soldier or a noble. He didn't wear armor or robes, just a set of dusty blue coveralls and a utility belt with tools clinking softly at his side. His boots were worn, his shoulders relaxed, and his gaze focused, not on the throne, but on the damaged light fixtures, hovering just above the floor. One of the queen's treasured levitating orbs had short-circuited after Zurok's most recent rage. That was Kalen's job. Fix it, fast, and don't die doing it. The guards didn't greet him. The courtiers just stepped back in silence. Queen Selithra watched from her crystal throne, her 4 eyes glowing gently. Her voice rang out across the chamber, calm but stern. "You may begin, human," she said. "My companion does not enjoy waiting." Kalen gave a small nod and stepped forward slowly. He wasn't reckless. He had worked on mining rigs that hung over active lava flows, repaired oxygen units in failing stations, and once patched up a ship while its pilot was actively being chased by pirates. But this was different. The danger here had a heartbeat, and it was watching him. Zurok lifted his head as the human approached. The creature's breath came out in low, rumbling huffs, each exhale making Kalen's hair shift slightly. The beast's nostrils flared, catching the scent of grease and metal. He stared with quiet intensity, like a hunter sizing up prey. Kalen didn't run. He didn't freeze either. He took a deep breath and knelt beside the flickering orb. His fingers moved confidently, removing a panel and pulling out burnt wires. And then softly, almost like he was talking to an old dog back home, he said, "Not here to cause trouble, big guy. Just fixing your lamp." The room held its breath. No one spoke. No one dared move. Zurok's eyes didn't blink, but after a long moment, the dragon-like creature tilted his head just slightly. A curious gesture, not hostile, not yet. Kalen kept working. Every now and then, he'd say a few quiet words. Not to the queen, not to the audience, just to Zurok. "This wiring's a mess," he muttered once then. "You ever get bored in here? Doesn't look like they give you much to do." His voice was steady, patient. He moved carefully, never making sudden gestures, always staying in view of the beast, and Zurok watched. Not with hunger, but with what seemed, if such a word could be used for a monster, interest. The minutes passed, and the tension in the chamber changed. Guards glanced at each other, confused. The queen leaned slightly forward, her fingers curled around the arms of her throne. She had seen Zurok rip apart armored invaders, but here he was, lying still, his tail flicking only once when Kalen chuckled. to himself after reconnecting a circuit. Then something no one expected happened. Zurok moved. Not with violence, but with purpose. The giant beast slithered forward, slow and deliberate, until his snout rested just a meter from Kalen. The human looked up but didn't stop working. He reached out with a screwdriver and gently tapped the side of the orb. "There," he said. "You've got light again." Zurok let out a sound. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't even a growl. It was low, steady, almost like a cat's purr. It vibrated through the floor and into Kalen's boots. The human stood and wiped his hands on his jumpsuit. "Good boy," he said, reaching out to pat the creature's snout. No one dared breathe. Zurok didn't snap, didn't bite, didn't growl. He leaned in. In that moment, something changed in the room. The queen stood, her eyes wide, her voice soft with amazement. "In all these years, no one has ever—" Kalen shrugged. "He's not a monster," he said. "He's just lonely." Zurok made a soft sound again, something between a sigh and a hum. He didn't want the human to leave. And just like that, in the place where fear ruled for decades, something entirely unexpected bloomed. Trust. Word of what happened in the throne room spread across the palace faster than any official broadcast ever could. A human, an outsider, had stood in the presence of the feared creature Zurok and lived. Not just lived, but walked away without a scratch. That alone would have made Kalen Rios a figure of fascination, but what truly stunned the court was how the beast, once thought uncontrollable, had responded with something resembling affection. Queen Selithra, known for her measured decisions and cautious nature, did not speak of the incident immediately. Instead, she ordered Kalen to remain within the palace walls. He was assigned temporary quarters near the engineering wing and told to await further instructions. But the truth was, no one quite knew what to do next. Not the queen, not her advisors, and certainly not the guards who now stepped aside with wide eyes every time Kalen passed. For his part, Kalen kept his head down. He continued working on small repairs requested by the palace, light fixtures, stabilizers, door systems, nothing flashy. He didn't speak of Zurok unless someone asked directly, and even then he simply said, "He's not so bad when you treat him like he matters." Most people nodded but didn't believe him. They were still afraid. Only one person openly challenged him, Riva Nalik, the queen's head of palace security. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and had personally lost 2 guards to Zurok in the last 6 months. When she cornered Kalen near the power conduits one morning, she didn't mince words. "You're playing a dangerous game," she said, arms crossed. "I'm doing my job," Kalen replied, crouching to check a connection. "Your job didn't include bonding with a killing machine." Kalen looked up at her, calm. "Maybe your job shouldn't be to treat him like one." The tension between them hung thick for a moment, but Riva said nothing more and left with a tight jaw. She didn't like Kalen, but she couldn't deny the facts. Zurok had changed. Or perhaps he had finally been seen. 2 days later, Queen Selithra sent for Kalen again. This time, it wasn't for repairs. The throne room looked different now. The scorched floor had been cleaned. The damaged orbs floated gently in place, their light steady. Zurok wasn't wrapped around the throne anymore. He sat to the side, more relaxed, his tail coiled loosely beneath him. His eyes followed Kalen as he entered. "I'd like you to observe him more closely," the queen said. "See if what happened last time can be repeated, or even understood." Kalen gave a quiet nod. He didn't need grand speeches. He just needed time. So began a new rhythm. Each morning, Kalen entered the throne room with his tools. He would find something to work on, a panel, a relay, a sensor, and Zurok would watch. Kalen talked while he worked, never raising his voice, never showing fear. Sometimes he shared stories about old jobs on far-off moons. Other times he asked questions, not expecting answers. "Do you remember your first day here?" he asked once. Zurok didn't respond, of course, but he blinked slowly as if considering the thought. Days passed. On the fifth morning, Kalen brought a small device into the room, a music player. He set it on the floor and played soft earth music, something old and simple. Zurok tilted his head, then lay down completely, his massive frame relaxed. Not everyone was impressed. Riva watched the sessions from behind tinted glass, arms always crossed. "You're treating him like a house pet," she said during one of their encounters. "He's a weapon, Kalen. He's been treated like a weapon for years." Kalen replied, "What's that gotten anyone?" The queen, for all her silence, was watching too. She sat on her throne during each session, speaking only if necessary. But her gaze was sharp. She was trying to understand, trying to decide what to believe. Then, something happened that no one could explain. Midway through a repair, Kalen dropped his tool. It clattered across the floor, spinning toward Zurok. Everyone watching held their breath. Zurok didn't lunge or growl. Instead, he reached out with one claw, carefully pinned the tool down, then pushed it back toward Kalen. Kalen smiled. "Thanks, friend," he said, picking it up without hesitation. The queen stood. Her voice, when she spoke, echoed through the room. "Zurok has never returned anything before," she said. "He destroys. He does not serve." Kalen looked up at her. Maybe he's never been asked to do anything else. That evening, the court buzzed with questions. The scribes recorded everything, calling it the day the monster showed manners. Rumors grew. Some said Kalen had used secret technology. Others said he was gifted with psychic abilities. But Kalen knew the truth. He treated Zurok like he mattered. That was all. On the seventh day, something even stranger occurred. As Kalen walked toward the throne room, Zurok was already waiting near the entrance, not lying down, standing, waiting, as if expecting his friend. This time, when Kalen worked, Zurok didn't just watch. He moved beside him, nudging loose panels, closer with his snout, holding wires gently in his claws. It was clumsy but clear. He wanted to help. The moment was quiet, beautiful, and completely unbelievable. The beast, once feared across the stars, had become something no one could define. And still, Riva watched, silent, suspicious, waiting for it all to go wrong. By the third week, the palace no longer flinched when Kalen walked alongside Zurok. What had begun as fear and disbelief had shifted into something else. Curiosity, maybe even hope. The throne room, once filled with stiff silence and nervous energy, had softened. Courtiers still kept their distance, but now they stayed to watch. Some whispered to one another about what it all meant. Others just stared, unsure how to understand the bond growing between the human mechanic and the creature once known only for destruction. Zurok no longer clung to the throne like a living threat. He moved freely now, following Kalen through the palace halls, always careful, always watching. He was still huge, still terrifying to look at with his jagged black scales and eyes that glowed like embers. But he had not hurt anyone since the day Kalen first spoke to him. Not even close. He had become calm, deliberate, even gentle. And most importantly, he was listening. One morning, an unexpected guest arrived at the palace. Her name was Ayala. She was a child, no more than 10, small and quiet, with pale skin and short black hair. She had come from a colony far across the planet, part of a delegation allowed to visit the palace. Ella did not speak. Whether by choice or by condition, no one knew, but she communicated only through gestures and expressions. Most people paid her little attention. She was quiet, fragile, and barely noticeable. But Zurok noticed. The child had been wandering near the edge of the throne room when she saw the beast lying beside Kalen. Most of the delegation kept their distance, but not Ayala. She walked forward, calm and curious, her eyes wide. The guards reached for their weapons, and a court official began to shout a warning, but Queen Selithra raised her hand, stopping them all. Ella stepped right up to Zurok, her small hand reaching toward the creature's nose. The room held its breath. Zurok's eyes narrowed for a moment, Then he lowered his head slowly. The child touched his scales. He did not move. Kalen watched the scene with a stunned expression. He had seen Zurok behave gently before, but this was different. This was trust in its rawest form. No words, no signals, just quiet understanding between a child and a beast everyone else feared. Later that day, Queen Silithra asked Kalen how it was possible. "He reacts to peace," Kalen said. "To calm. He doesn't understand words, but he reads behavior. Fear makes him nervous, anger makes him defensive, but when someone's honest, when they're open, he knows. He has never been open to others," the Queen said quietly. "Perhaps he never had the chance." Ayla began visiting daily. She brought pieces of polished rock from her home, setting them near Zurok like little gifts. Zurok began collecting them in a pile beside his usual resting spot, gently nudging each one into place. It was strange, even sweet. The palace started to feel different, less like a fortress and more like a place where something new was being built. Not everyone was ready to accept it. Elder Cheyenne, one of the oldest advisors in the court, approached Queen Silithra privately. He was a man of caution, old tradition, and deep knowledge of palace history. He reminded her that Zurok had once nearly destroyed an entire shipyard in a single day. "This change may be an illusion," he warned, "a calm before the return of chaos." But Silithra didn't answer him right away. She had been watching, quietly, like Zurok did, and in that watching, she had begun to question what she thought she knew. One evening, after most of the court had gone to their quarters, Kalen sat near Zurok with his tools, fixing a guidance panel on a floating lamp. Ayla sat beside him, drawing shapes in the dust with her finger. Zurok lay near them both, unmoving, but very much awake. "I think he misses having a purpose," Kalen said softly, not looking up. "He's treated like a weapon. But even weapons want meaning. They want to be used for something that matters." Ella looked at him and nodded. Kalen continued, "He's not silent because he has nothing to say. He's silent because no one's ever listened." In that quiet moment, Zurok shifted. He reached out with his claw and very gently moved the broken lamp closer to Kalen. Then, with a precision that stunned even Kalen, he used a claw tip to press a loose wire into place. It clicked with a soft sound, the light above flickering back on. The three of them sat in the glow for a while. No one spoke. There was no need. The next day, Zurok followed Kalen to the palace workshop. The beast was careful, ducking beneath arches and avoiding low-hanging structures. He waited outside while Kalen collected parts and tools. Servants watched, stunned, as the monster simply sat there, as calm as a pet dog waiting for its owner. That same afternoon, Zurok helped move a large piece of equipment into place. It was heavy and awkward, but he lifted it gently with both front limbs and carried it across the room, placing it exactly where Kalen needed it. The workers there didn't run. Some even thanked him. Bit by bit, Zurok was no longer just the Queen's terrifying pet. He was becoming something new, something bigger than his past. The bond he shared with Kalen and now with Ayla was changing him. And through him, the palace was changing too. For the first time in memory, the halls of Tarson 9 were filled with quiet, not from fear, but from peace. The palace had never felt so alive. Days passed with a sense of calm that was almost strange to those who lived in the shadow of fear for so long. Zurok, the once feared beast of Tarson 9, no longer moved like a threat. His steps were slow, thoughtful, and oddly polite. He helped carry heavy tools across the workshop, lowered damaged ornaments for repairs, and even sat patiently during long council meetings, his presence no longer terrifying but strangely comforting. Kalen Rios had become more than just the palace mechanic. His calm voice and steady hands had reached something in Zurok that no one else had ever found. What began as small gestures, words spoken during repairs, soft touches, quiet respect, had turned into a bond stronger than the Queen's guards or spells. And now, people were beginning to see the creature in a new way, not just as a monster, but as a companion, a guardian, maybe even a friend. Ayala still visited Zurok daily, bringing him trinkets and handmade drawings. She never spoke a word, but Zurok understood her better than most. He always greeted her gently, allowing her to lean against him or sit near his clawed feet while she sketched. The court, once full of stiff silence, had begun to whisper stories about the dragon who chose peace and the child who hurt his heart. But peace doesn't last without challenge. One morning, as the palace prepared for a celebration to honor a century of Queen Silithra's rule, a visitor arrived, General Votan. He was a leader from the northern territories, where war was still fresh and peace a fragile hope. Broad-shouldered and grim-faced, he wore armor that gleamed with authority and suspicion. As soon as he laid eyes on Zurok resting in the great hall, his voice cut through the calm like a blade. "That creature is still allowed to roam free?" The room went silent. Zurok, lifting his head slowly, stared at the general with steady eyes. He didn't growl or move, but his presence was enough to freeze the guards. Queen Silithra stood from her throne, her tone firm. "He has harmed no one in many weeks. He is part of this palace." "A beast like that doesn't change," Votan snapped. "It waits, then it strikes. I've seen it before. My own cousin died when it destroyed a transport station 3 years ago. You want peace, I understand. But this pet of yours? It's a danger wrapped in skin." Kalen stepped forward, placing himself between Zurok and the general without thinking. "He's not a danger," he said calmly. "He's more than you give him credit for." General Votan frowned. "You're defending it like it's a person." "He is a person," Kalen replied. "Maybe not in the way we usually think, but he feels, he learns, he chooses. And right now, he's choosing not to tear this room apart, even though you're shouting in his face." Some in the court gasped. Others nodded. Votan scoffed. "You'd risk your life on the word of a creature that can't even speak?" "He doesn't have to speak," Kalen said. "He listens, he helps, he protects. That's more than I can say for some who do talk." Zurok slowly stood, not to intimidate but to make his position clear. He walked forward, not toward Votan, but toward Kalen, and sat beside him. The message was unmistakable. The queen took a long breath. "This creature has chosen to serve with peace, and we will honor that choice." The celebration continued, though the mood stayed uneasy. Votan left that evening, his warnings still hanging in the air. Days later, Queen Silithra called Kalen to her private chamber. The room was quieter than usual. A soft breeze drifted in through the high windows. "I've watched how he follows you," the queen said. "Not because he must, but because he wants to." Kalen nodded. "He's tired of being feared. I believe it's time," she continued, "to give him something more. A place of his own. A role that is not forced upon him." She offered Kalen a new position, royal companion to Zurok and caretaker of the palace's living systems. It would mean training Zurok to assist in safety, learning, even welcoming guests. Kalen accepted without hesitation. He deserves a purpose. And so the great halls of the palace shifted again. A new wing was opened, once used for storing ancient weapons, now turned into Zurok's home. It had space to stretch, lights he could adjust, and a perch that overlooked the gardens. He was given a choice of when to rest and when to roam, and he always returned. He helped rebuild parts of the palace wall, assisted in calming frightened animals during storms, and even guided lost children back to their families during one festival. Ella placed a handmade plaque at the entrance to his quarters. It read simply, "Zurok's watch." He would sleep there at night, sometimes curled gently around the wall, sometimes near the stars. Kalen remained at his side, always with a tool in hand and a smile ready. The fear faded, the court adapted, and the legend of the Beast of Tarsan 9 transformed forever. Not into a tale of terror, but into a story of trust. Because in the end, the dragon didn't need chains to stay. He only needed someone who believed he didn't belong in them.